For those of you that are familiar with Mocha, you will know that as part of our wonderful partnership with Adobe, you can simply select a clip that you want to track. You can go to Animation, you can track in Mocha AE, and what this will do is this will actually bring up a separate piece of software, right? So once you do track in Mocha AE, thank you. Thanks. What this will do is this will bring up a piece of software, and you can actually just start to make a new clip right here, and you make a new project, and what this will do is this will allow you to do tracking in Roto right inside right inside of a standalone piece of software. But this is not part of your timeline. You actually still have to load your footage in. In this case, I will show you we have a lovely track and roto shot already done for this. But the important thing to note here is that the workflow is copy and paste. So it still tracks the same way that Mocha always works. So if we turn our surface tool on here, you can see that we have our surface tool tracked to this location. The workflow, though, is we go to export tracking data, we go to our corner pin, we copy that through a clipboard, okay? Close this. And what we can actually do is we can go to our clip and we can actually paste our data in. When we go to Edit, Paste, it pastes in as a corner pin right inside of our software. From there we can actually paste in our roto shapes as well, just like this. And we can actually put our fingers back over the top. But that's a totally different workflow than how the plugin works. The plugin works like this. We're going to take our original animation clip, and over here in our effects and controls, our horizontal clip 2, right, we have a Mocha Pro plugin option. So let's talk about how that works. I'm going to show you exactly how this works. We're going to come over here to Mocha. We're going to grab Mocha Pro. We're going to drag it and drop it right onto our timeline. Now notice this is in the Effects and Presets panel. You can find it here as well, Effects and Presets, okay? So if you go to Effect, Mocha by Imagineer Systems, Mocha Pro. All right, now we have this big icon inside of our new effect on our layer. We can just click Mocha. It says this host is not set to full resolution. Tracking at reduced resolution can be faster, but it's less accurate. Do you wish to continue tracking at proxy resolution? Okay, you can choose to press warning, but I actually would keep it up. We're going to hit cancel. We're actually going to move to full res. The reason I want to do that is because I'm tracking a small area. So if I track in proxy res, I might not get as good of a track because we're reading, again, from the host timeline. Now, the flip side of this is if you're using 4K footage and you're tracking in like half proxy res, obviously you're going to track a lot faster. And because you're tracking 4K, you're probably not going to lose enough tracking data to matter. So we're going to launch Mocha Pro. And now this is open as a plugin, okay? The difference being when I save and close this, it's going to apply to my timeline. Let's talk about that. So I'm going to first draw an X-spline right around the area that I want to track. Now I'm drawing this X-spline around this tablet. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to turn our surface tool on. This is the basics of Mocha tracking. We have Beziers right here if you want to use them. I don't recommend that you do, just because X-splines I feel are faster. The reason I feel like X-splines are faster is because you can relax for curves and pull tight for corners and get really quick shape adjustments, okay? Now Beziers are right here and you have to worry about handlebars. I don't care for that as much because manipulating them all at the same time is not as convenient to me. Now, we're going to turn our surface tool on. Inside of our surface tool, we're going to align our surface tool to the object that we want to track. Now we do this for two reasons. Okay, one is because we actually want to put a screen right here, so we want to make sure when we apply this data inside of After Effects that it's going to apply to my screen area. The other reason is that if I align my surface tool and the grid follows my surface tool to the track that I'm trying to create, what Mocha will do is Mocha will show me the tracking data, because actually the shape and the tracking data are separate. I can change the shape data at any time, but that just changes where the track is looking. The shape is where the track is looking, and the surface tool is actually the child of the track and shows you what the track is doing. We're going to leave this at 50% of minimum percent of pixels used. We're going to track translation, scale, rotation, shear, and perspective. We're going to leave it on large motion because that's the most basic motion you're going to need to use. And we're not going to use angular zoom because this object isn't rotating very quickly or zooming out very quickly. So we're going to go ahead and hit track forward. And what you're going to see is that Mocha is going to track this really fast. Now, another reason that Mocha is tracking this super fast is we've made some GPU improvements. That means we have a GPU tracker, and it does a little bit better job of using the GPU to speed up your track, which is to say it starts to fly. Now, once we're done with this track, we can take this tracking data and we can start to apply it using the insert tools. Now, for those of you that are used to Mocha for After Effects, you'll notice that the Clip tab, the Track tab, and Adjust Track tab are all that you have inside of Mocha for After Effects. Mocha Pro actually has a Lens tab where you can actually start to correct for lens warp, so if there was a lens warp on this, I could correct for it. Or we have the Camera Solver tab, we have the Insert, Remove, and Stabilize. We're going to go over the Insert, Remove, and Stabilize in this tutorial. So, in the Insert tab, what we're going to do is we're going to select an insert clip. Now, normally in the standalone of Mocha, you would go to Import. Now, in Import, you would choose a clip and bring it in. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to actually use Insert Layer, and we're going to actually use a layer right from our timeline inside of After Effects. So that's another benefit of the plugin. Now, the standalone has other benefits as well, so I don't want you to feel like I'm selling the standalone short. Standalone has Python support, so for those of you that are using tools, you're going to really appreciate that. It's got things, exports for things like Fusion as well. So, you know, it just depends on what your needs are. If you're a roto house, you know, obviously you're going to want to stick to the standalone because you don't necessarily want to have a bunch of other pieces of software you have to buy. But if you're a compositor instead of After Effects, this is a really powerful new tool. If you're an editor instead of Avid, this is a powerful new tool. Now,
I think, hey Mary, can you hear me there?
Yes, of course.
Yes, sorry to interrupt. I just thought that's actually a really good point that a lot of people should take note of, that even if you're using the Mocha Pro plugin for Adobe, which is what Mary is showing, all the exports formats are in there that you would have in your standalone. So, you know, whether you're exporting to Flame or to Nuke or everything, they will all export out of that Mocha Pro plugin.
Right, and you can do that right here, export tracking data, same as normal. All right.
Yeah, so it's not just for, even if you purchase the Mocha Pro plugin for Adobe, you have all the export supports to support any application. Just want to make that really clear for the users.
Of course, thank you. Now, what we're going to do from here is we're going to take this tracking data, we're going to save it and close it because we've done Insert Layer, right? We've gone in the Insert tab, and we've basically said that we're going to use this as an insert. We can check motion blur on if we want, okay? And we can save this, and we can close it. Now once we save and close, I can go into my module renders, and it's this easy. You notice I did not render inside of the plugin. I'm going to click Render inside of After Effects, and we're going to use our Insert Composite, okay? And we're going to use our Insert Layer. It's going to be our animation on our timeline. And so what Mocha will do is Mocha will drop this right into our timeline. Now, we do have one problem though. I want to add her fingers over the top of this. So how do I do that? Well, in Mocha for After Effects or inside of the Pro plugin, I would take my shape and I would copy my shape from Mocha Pro and I would paste it into a new layer inside of After Effects. But actually, using the insert inside of Mocha Pro, I can just do this as part of the same effect. So we're going to relaunch Mocha, okay? We're going to come in here. We're going to select our layer. We're going to turn our insert off for a minute so that I can see these fingers. We're going to draw a shape right around her fingers that are crossing the edge of our screen. Okay? We're going to call this screen and we're going to call this fingers, and this is just a sanitary workflow because obviously if you have layer 1, layer 2, and layer 40, you're not going to know what's what. We're going to take fingers, we're going to go to link to track on fingers, and we're going to link them to the screen track. I'm going to turn a tool on that I like to use for roto called the Auto Stabilize tool right here. And what we're going to do is we're going to have that shape be held in the middle of the screen. And that's going to actually make it to where I can do my roto much faster. All right, so we're just going to adjust this roto really quickly. I'm not going to make you sit through me rotoing a complex object. And so now that this is, we're looking for the areas where this has changed the most. Okay, we're just going to drag this right over here, just like that. All right, and now we have some roto that's good enough to show you for a demo. So inside of our insert tools, we're going to go back to our insert clip and do insert layer. I'm sorry, excuse me. We're going to do that on the screen layer. Very good. So we're going to go to our insert layer. Thanks very much. And now we're going to go to our insert, and we're, instead of using all foreground mats, I'm just going to go ahead and pick the mat that I want to use, and we're going to invert it. And so now that's actually right on my timeline. I can even do things like come in here, turn my Uber key on for a ripple offset, and I can add some edge feathering to this shape as well and move this down. So there's no limit to the kinds of things you can do in here. Once we're done, I can simply go ahead and save and close this. And now my render respects my mask right over the top of my insert. And it doesn't matter if this had lens data applied to it too. We could apply the lens data. It's the same exact thing. So it's a really powerful tool. Moving on, we're going to talk a little bit about how you use this for objects that are curved. So we had a question from a user a while back that was like, what do I do if I want to get a logo onto a coffee cup, for example, using planar tracking? Because obviously planar tracking tracks flat objects, so what's going on here? Well, what's going on here is we have actually done this the exact same way that we just did this other task. I'm going to go ahead and turn this off right quick. We're going to grab our Mocha Pro. We're going to drag and drop this right on to our clip. Okay. Inside of Mocha, we're going to launch Mocha up. Not set full resolution. Let's do that. We're going to set this to full. The reason we want to set this to full is because this coffee cup does not have a lot of texture on it. If I track this at like quarter res, I'm not going to have a lot of really good texture for Mocha to clamp onto. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you. Because what Mocha's doing is Mocha's actually a texture tracker. Okay, it's not a point tracker or a feature tracker. That means, obviously there are no points and features on this coffee cup, and it gets blurry. Okay, so that means we're going to have a little bit of a challenge with this shot. So what we're going to do is we're going to very quickly draw a garbage mat right around our paper here because it can potentially get in the way of our track. We're going to call this paper. Okay, and we're going to come in here and we're going to track our screen. Now we can track this, I'm sorry, not screen, our cup. Okay, so we're going to take our cup and we're going to drag it under our paper. Now the reason we do that is because we want the paper to be held out of this cup shape. If we don't do it this way, what Mocha will do is Mocha will try to track the paper and the cup at the same time because the paper will come into the cup shape. So now under it, if we stack our layers from the top of the layer pile being objects that are closest to the camera and the bottom of the layer pile being objects furthest from camera, what we're going to do is we're going to have hold-up mats for everything that we need to track. So we're going to track this backwards. We're going to track backwards. We'll talk a little bit about some advanced techniques for tracking as well. All right, so let's track forwards. Now when this starts to tilt, I actually want to start tracking perspective. So we're going to grab some perspective shift there. And there we are. So now what we want to do is we want to actually apply this to the, we want to apply a curve to this object. So let's come over here to the middle of our shot where this is nice and straight. And we're going to go to our insert clip. Now I'm just going to actually slap our logo onto here, and then we're going to jump to the insert tab. But the important thing I wanted to show you guys about the insert tab was this. Okay, I can zoom in a little bit. All right, and now what I can do is I can go to my warper tool. Now a lot of people do not use the warper tool because they don't know about it. So it's actually one of my favorite tools, and that's because a lot of times you can do patches with this that are more successful than doing a remove on something. So if you have like a complex object or an object with foreground blur, you can actually use the insert to do a patch instead, which is really useful. Or you can use it to do things like put logos onto a screen and actually match a mesh warp. So let's just go ahead and take a very simple mesh warp, and we're going to turn our surface tool off so that we don't grab it. And now we're going to make just a quick keyframe. I just want to make sure that this curves just a little bit around the object, but I don't want it to curve a lot around the object because we haven't reached that point of the curve yet. Now what I can also do is I can still put my auto stabilize tool on here, and so I can start to really pay attention as to what's happening with my curve. Okay, and we can really adjust our curve here and bring up our middle. All right, so what we're going to end up with is this nice linear animation of our warp. So now if we take this off, and obviously it's going to be as good as the animation that you're taking time to do. So now we have our track and we have our curved warp along with this cup. All right, so now what I can do is I can come into my Insert tab. We can turn Motion Blur on for this, for example. We could even come into our comp and we could add, we could even come into our comp and we could take the opacity down if we needed to. All right, and now from here what we can do is we can just save and close this, and then inside of our module renders we can go ahead and turn render on, insert composite, and it'll actually render this for us right onto our timeline inside of After Effects. So let me just take this down to like quarter res for a second so it renders really fast, and let's show you what that ends up looking like. And so you can see that you can apply this right to your shot very, very quickly without having to do a whole lot of work. Now, this is actually kind of difficult to do inside of After Effects using tracking data and things like the warp tool or things like the puppet tool, which there are really good workarounds for that, but you know, this is a really fast way to do it. So the idea here is that we create some tools for you that are going to allow you to do some compositing tasks that would be difficult in other pieces of software. Now, let's go ahead and move on. So another thing that we can do is we can actually do tracking applied inside, track masks applied inside of our plugin as well. So in this case what we're doing is we're actually going to darken these young gentlemen's masks. Okay, and the way this is going to work is what we do is we just simply do a roto inside of Mocha using the exact same techniques I've been showing you. Okay, and I just want to point out something really quick about roto inside of Mocha. When you do roto inside of Mocha, I showed you this in the fingers, but I want to drive this point home. Sometimes if you have just like a flat object, for example, you don't need to make many keyframes, okay? That's because Mocha is using the planar tracker to drive your roto shapes. It means we cut your keyframes down to about a third of what you would normally use and cut your roto time in half, but actually for this mask on the right, there's only one keyframe and you can see it right here on the beginning. Now for things like these glasses, which are actually at slightly different angles, when they're not quite on a 180-degree plane, they're slightly curved. It's like what we're going to do instead is we're going to actually have to add some corrective keyframes to our roto to actually get that to look right. Now from here we can simply save and close this. Okay, and what that'll do is we can actually apply that inside of our mats. Okay, we're going to apply our mats, all visible layers, and we can actually see what our visible layers are. We can turn them off and on if we want to. And now it'll apply right to our shot, so we can just come in here and we apply our adjustment layer, okay, that we want to do our color correction on, and we can actually use our mask on that. The other thing that we can do is we can actually take this very same plugin, for example, and I can go into my tracking data here. We can create tracking data, okay, from whatever layer we want. So in this case we're going to do the left mask, okay, and we hit OK. Now the thing about this is I can now go into my improved lenses text that I have, okay, and inside of my improved lenses text, what I can do is I can take this, let's turn this off, I can take this and I can actually go to add expression, right? So in this case we're going to go to animation and we can do add expression. Now what that does is that creates on our position, right? Animation, add expression. Okay, so now we can come into here and we can actually take this pick whip, and if we select our tracking data layer we can take our pick whip and we can pick whip it to our center data, and now our text actually moves along with the tracks that we have created. So you can actually, you don't not have access to to your corner pin data. You know, you can either copy and paste it in if you want, you can still paste your tracking data in, or you can actually pull it from the tracking data inside of the plugin. So there's a lot of ways to skin a cat using this Mocha Pro plugin. Now the next thing I want to talk about is how we use this for Stabilize as well. So for this shot, for example, this shot is a handheld shot. What we want to do though is we want to lock it down. So let's just look here. Here's our handheld shot. You can see there's a slight drift to it. Now if I were going to try to stabilize this shot using like a warp stabilizer or using any other feature-driven tracker, I might have some problems. And the reason I would have some problems is because we're full of foreground animated people. We don't have a lot of hard details anywhere to grab, and there's a lot of focus blur. Okay, so what I'm going to do instead is we're going to take our shot here. We're going to switch to full resolution for our track. Okay, and what I can do is I can actually launch Mocha Pro, and inside of Mocha what I can do is I can track these two background areas. Now I'm using a shape to track this. We're just going to show you really quick how we did this. We're tracking this shape up here, and we're using Add to X-Spline. Now Add to X-Spline is great because it allows you to actually track more than one thing at a time, okay, or more than one section of a plane at a time. Now because this background is so blurry, it essentially doesn't have any parallax that I'm going to worry about, okay, so we're just going to track this all as if it were one plane. This is cheating, okay. I normally say only track one plane at a time, and the reason I say only track one plane at a time is because Mocha is going to give you the best data that way, but sometimes you need to track multiple planes at the same time in order to get a good solid idea of what the camera is doing. So for this, for Stabilize, we're trying to figure out what the camera is doing. Alright, so we're going to track this and track this. Now, I've already tracked that for you, so we're going to go ahead and delete that layer. So now that we've already tracked this for you, I'm going to show you what the track looks like. We just track this right through the screen. Now the better your track is, the better your Stabilize is going to be. So if you have a rock solid track, you're going to rock solid Stabilize. We jump to our Stabilize. In this case, we're going to stabilize all motion with maximum smoothing, and instead of having black edges, okay, I'm going to ask Mocha to center, zoom, and apply the crop. Okay, so now we can go ahead and save this and close it, and the inside of our module renders, you can see we've locked our shot down. Now the nice thing about that is something that we've done without any features or anything like that. The other thing I want to point out is when you're using Stabilize inside of Mocha, you don't always want to stabilize the shot locked down, and let's talk about why that is. So in this case, we have this shot. Let me just turn Mocha off for a second. So we have this shot, and it's very handheld, it's underwater, it's very shaky, okay? Now, the problem with that is that this was shot with a DSLR. DSLRs are wonderful, but one of the things they have a problem with is like shutter blur and a rolling shutter. So when you're filming with this type of stuff, you don't want to try to lock the shot down completely unless you've been filming at high speed. If you filmed at high speed, you're not going to have a lot of motion blur, but this actually has motion blur. So what we're going to do is we're going to launch this, and I'll show you why you don't necessarily want to lock this totally down. We're going to go to full resolution. Okay, and we're going to track this area over here. Now we've tracked this area right over here for a reason. The reason we have tracked this is because there's fish all over this side, okay, and we have our guy and our shadow and a lot of lighting shifts happening underneath him. So I wanted to find an area with a lot of detail, okay, which is going to be right here, a lot of detail that didn't have a lot of light flicker on it, okay. Now, even though there's like some particles happening and a little bitty fish going through this shape, it doesn't actually damage my track, okay, and that's because Mocha's smart enough to know that little tiny anomalies are not part of the main texture. But if I try to track over here, there's just too many anomalies, and they're not moving fast enough for Mocha to ignore them, okay. So now we're going to go to our Stabilize, but I want to show you what happens if we hit all motion and maximum smoothing. Let's turn our shape off. See, if I hit all motion and maximum smoothing, do you see how this wobbles? Okay, it wobbles because of the shutter, and it wobbles because of blur. Okay, we don't want that. That's not ideal. Even if we took out all motion and just did X, Y, and rotation and zoom, for example, we would still get a little bit of a wobble, and that's because of the blur changes in the shot, okay? So what we want to do instead of maximum smoothing is we actually want to smooth this like every 8 frames or so. What that'll do is that'll give us a nice pan that's really easy to look at, okay? That doesn't make our eyes hurt and it doesn't make us feel sick, but it also takes into account those focus changes without looking awkward and unnatural. So now we're going to save. We're going to close this, and again, it's really this easy inside of our module renders, okay? We're just going to hit render on, stabilize, okay, and then right inside of our timeline, let's put this down to quarter res so it renders real fast. Renders right to our timeline so we can start to do anything else that we need to do to this shot. Now, we can even do things like once this is stabilized, because, okay, here's something that users have needed to do for a long time. They're like, well, I want to add an effect on this, but I want to stabilize my shot first. Well, great. If you take this and you pre-comp it, you go to Layer, Pre-compose, you can actually slap another Mocha on top of that, and you can actually read those pixels into your Mocha timeline. So no more rendering and importing. So that's an important point I want to make. All right. Now moving on, let's talk about the last thing that I want to talk about for the Mocha plugin for this tutorial, and that is the remove tool. Now we've been rendering all of this stuff right back to our timeline. That includes the remove. So in this case, we've got this shot where these 2 girls are walking through the scene. I want to take this girl out because I want to make her vanish. Okay, I want to do like a smoke effect and make her vanish. But in order to do that, what I need to do is I need to remove her first. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to launch Mocha, and I'm actually going to do this shot from scratch just so you can see. All right, so we're going to end up with something that looks like this. All right, and let's talk about how. I'm going to take that, I'm going to delete that effect. We're going to take Mocha Pro and drop it right on. I'm going to launch Mocha Pro, and it says, up, not set to full resolution. We're going to do that, full resolution. Now we're going to launch this, okay? Inside of Mocha, I'm going to do a couple of things. We're going to track this girl, and you notice I'm making a really big garbage mat around her. All right, now why am I doing that? The reason I make a big, huge garbage mat is because I want to make sure that I don't catch any stray hairs, any elbows, any motion blur, nothing on the background, because we're going to track this background and use it to replace this girl. Now, the thing about that is if I don't have the data, or if the data is confusing to Mocha, it's not going to do a very good job. Let's actually switch to translation only to just nudge this off screen, just like that. Perfect. And now let's do just a little bit of roto correction here. So we've got our shape. We want to make sure her chin isn't in it. We want to make sure that her elbow doesn't come out. Okay, just like that. We want to make sure that she's inside of this shape at all times. Just like this. And we're going to move this right off screen. Just like that. And then totally off screen. One more. There we go. All right, so what we've got is this girl inside of the shape at the entire time. Now the next thing we're going to do is, because this girl also goes over the background over here, we're just going to do a quick and dirty garbage mat right around her. I don't even know that I'm going to track it because I don't think I need to. Just move that over and move it off screen. Let's just make sure that we get her hand totally in there. All right, and we're going to drag this over right here. So there we are. We have her held out for the whole thing. And it doesn't matter. You don't need tracking data to hold someone out. You just need the shape to hold them out. So we're going to call this red. We're going to call this yellow. And we're going to come to the background, and we're going to track the entire background that moves behind the area that we want to remove. Now this is really important, okay? We're going to go ahead and track this backwards. In fact, we can even unlink this from the track so that it'll just track, if we link to track none, we're going to call this BG. What it'll do is it'll actually read the track, but it will not read the splines anymore. We're cutting our gears off on our red and yellow layers, and the reason we're doing that is because if we don't, Mocha will continue to try to track them, and that will slow us down. I'm going to turn my surface tool on, and I'm going to turn my grid on so that you can see what happens when we track this backwards, okay, but the track is unlinked. So link to track none. Let's go translation, scale, rotation, shear, and perspective. Let's make sure that we're tracking a good amount of data. Let's hit track backwards. Now watch what happens. What's going to happen is this surface tool is moving, but look, my shape isn't moving. And you notice that because I dropped my background underneath red and yellow, they're held out from the track. That means that two things, okay? It means that one, when I track inside of the shape, it's looking everywhere inside of this shape, but inside of this one and this one. The other thing it means is that when I am doing my remove and Mocha is looking at this background shape in order to try to decide how many pixels and where the pixels need to go behind this shape, that it's not going to read this shape in that pixel calculation. Okay, so we're going to look inside this shape to replace this shape. That's my base way to simplify it. I've probably over-explained it a couple of times, but it's important because I want you to understand how this works. It's not actually doing a patch. What it's doing is using the tracking data to replace the object pixel by pixel, and it can even adjust the lighting if you need it to. Okay. Now I do notice that I'm going to have to adjust my roto shape here on her hair because a couple of frames ahead of time we actually left that on the background. And again, Mocha will read that because Mocha is only as good as the data you tell it. So you need rock solid tracks, okay, and you need good roto if you're going to do removes. Now removes also work on planar data, okay, so if this were really moving in fractal back here, if there was a lot of tree motion or there was a lot of wind, then we would actually be better fixing that in a patch and not with the remove tool. Okay, so now let's just go ahead and adjust that roto shape. Turn our surface tool off. There we are. We'll just adjust that whole roto shape there. Perfect. Okay, so now what we can do is we can select the girl that we want to remove, okay, and we can go to our Remove tab. Inside of our Remove tab, let's just turn our Surface and Grid tool off. All right. Inside of our Remove tab, what we can do is we can decide whether or not we want to use linear illumination or interpolate illumination. Let's talk about what that means. I don't need to use it for the shot, but I want to talk about what it means. We're going to show it in the next shot. Linear illumination modeling will actually take this shape and it will look at the edges all around this shape, and it will raise the hue, saturation, and value in a linear way based on all of the data that is happening around the edges. Now that I don't want to do for this because that'll actually really alter my colors because it's doing hue, saturation, and value, not just brightness, okay? Now, if I did that, what I would end up with is green and brown inside of the shape, and I don't want that, all right? Because if I did that, it would be model looking. Now, interpolate illumination modeling will actually do a sort of mesh warp hue, saturation, and value. It's not really a mesh warp, but that's the best way to explain it. It's calculating the colors down here and the colors down here, and it tries to blend between the two on your shape. That's going to be really good for shots that have a lot of lighting shifts, shots that have stuff like night shots where there's lights in the background, or fractal sort of patterns that are made by things like caustics. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and select yellow. We're not going to do illumination modeling. We're going to save this and we're going to close, and it's that easy. Okay, inside of my module renders, we're going to do render. We're going to do remove. Okay, and now go down to quarter res for a second, so this will render real fast. We can remove the girl from our shot just like that. And let's actually, I feel like let's go to half res for a second so we can get rid of that caching error. There we go. All right, so now we can remove the girl totally from the scene, just like that. All right. Now, if you need to use a clean plate, this technique is a little bit different, okay? You can actually use the clean plate from your timeline, or you can use a clean plate that you save somewhere. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to take this lovely young lady, and here's her before, and we're going to clean her up to this after. We just want to get rid of some of the things on her face that maybe art directors would be a little bit concerned about. So we're going to use two tools. I'm going to use a BCC tools to do skin smoothing, but first I want to use a tool to get rid of this mole right under her eyebrow. So what we're going to do, let's just go ahead and take Mocha Pro, and let's remove this. Okay? We're going to drag and drop Mocha Pro right onto our timeline. Now, inside of our Mocha Pro, we're going to launch this, right? And now we're going to do a very simple solve. Okay, we're going to track this whole little eyebrow section, just real quick. Won't take a minute. And then what we're going to do is we're going to actually take a roto shape and link it to this. And we're going to do some really quick feathering on that to make it look nice. All right, so we've got a lovely track. Now I'm going to draw a little shape right around this little mole. Okay, and we're going to call this mole. We're going to call this brow track. Okay, and so for mole, we're going to smooth this shape out by relaxing all of our lasso points for a curve. We're going to go to our pick edge. And we're going to select our edge points, and we're going to feather this shape out a little bit, just like this. What that's going to do is give us some really nice, excuse me, we had the Add Points to Spline tool selected. That's not what we wanted. There we are. All right, so now what we can do is we can have a nice feathered edge to our object that we want to remove. We're going to take mole and we're going to link it to brow track. But I want you to watch what happens if we go to our remove and we try to remove that. Okay, if we hit remove, nothing is going to happen. Okay, and the reason nothing's going to happen is because it's trying to replace this with information it doesn't have. It can't see behind this mole, so we need to give it a clean plate to be able to see behind this mole. So I can do this a couple of ways. I can either go, in my remove, I can either go to my clean plate clip and do an insert layer, okay, and so that would be whatever insert I have put into my shot, or I can actually import a clean plate that I've made in Photoshop. I'm just going to import a clean plate real quick. We're going to just open this. I could have dropped this onto my timeline as well. It doesn't matter. We're going to make sure that this is from frame 226. So that's important because it needs to line up. We're going to hit OK. Okay, and now what we're actually going to do is instead of just using a different type of instead of using no illumination modeling, let me show you right quick. If we save and close this. If we come in here and we go to Module Renders, we render this. We render the remove, we're not going to match the lighting, okay? So what we want to do instead is we want to actually go ahead and use illumination modeling. So inside of this, we're going to launch Mocha Pro. Inside of remove, on our mole, we're going to make sure we use clean plates exclusively, because if we don't use clean plates exclusively, it's going to try to pull from the background. And we're going to use linear illumination modeling. What that's going to do is that's going to read all around this line and try to adjust the hue, saturation, and value based on all of the flickering that's happening inside of this shot. You see how there's a lot of dancing light over her face. So we're going to save this and we're going to close it. Okay, and now we can remove this throughout the shot and it'll match the lighting really nicely. If I wanted to do a skin cleanup on top of this, what I could do is I could simply go over to my tools and I could go into like my BCC Beauty Studio, for example, and we can drag and drop this right onto her skin. And what it'll do is it'll actually do a really nice job of smoothing out some of the light on her skin in this shot. So that is how you use Mocha Pro in conjunction with other tools inside of your After Effects timeline or your Premiere timeline to get really great effects. If you have any questions, now would be the time to answer them, because I think we have about a couple of minutes that we can actually use for Q&A.
Yeah, Mary, we have a couple of minutes. Thanks so much for an excellent tutorial or webinar. You really covered quite a lot there in such a short time. Let me see here. I'm just going to review some of the questions. We've been answering a lot of the questions via the chat. One thing people have been asking about is the new licensing system. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really big thing to let people know about, is that the new licensing system allows you to basically install Mocha on any system, and then you can simply activate or deactivate your license. So if you want to move this, from your laptop and you want to take it to work and things like that, that's no problem. It's very similar to the way that Adobe Creative Cloud, you can just simply deactivate or activate your license. Because we're a plugin, some users were asking about where do these files go and how is it auto-saved. So Mary, I don't know if you want to answer that question, but basically,
sure, of course.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the files actually save as part of your project, as part of the plugin, but if you want to export them, you can. So if I wanted to export this project, for example, I could simply launch Mocha. I could go to my file, and I could go to Export Project. I can save this project anywhere as a Mocha file, and I can bring this into any standalone Mocha as well. Okay. That being said, you don't have to do that. You can just simply save it, and it's saved as part of the plugin when you load your file. I like to save it as a backup, just so I have the Mocha files so that I can move back and forth between the standalone and the plugin. But your mileage may vary on how complex your projects are.
Another question that had come up a couple times was people were asking about doing inserts. Could you bring up your insert project?
Of course.
And I think it might be interesting just to show people, show people the option in the module renders. Sorry about that. If you go back,
yeah. Not in Mocha.
Yeah, that you could cutout option as well.
Yeah, so you can just show the cutout on a background. So in this case, it's going to be.
There you go.
Right.
Yeah. So some people were asking about the idea. You want to use the insert module, which has the mesh warper and all the great functions, but then you might want to use After Effects blending modes or add more effects. So if you'd like to it's sort of like similar workflow that you might use with the copy paste tracking, but you're actually using the plugin for the render here.
Right,
so
exactly.
Just important for people to know that they have more options, when you're actually finishing your composite.
Yeah, of course. And as I was mentioning earlier, there's way more than one way to skin a cat in compositing. So yeah, knowing all of the options that you can use is very important.
Yeah, okay. Someone asked a question just now, when using the remove module, and if you're removing a foreground element that is on a background that is very organic, say for example the trees are moving and blowing a lot in the wind, how would you attack this kind of issue?
I wouldn't use the remove module on it. Because what I would do instead, because you have like if all of these trees were moving, for example, what I would have to do is I would have to roto out all of this. What is this? An electrical tower? Anyway, I would have to roto out this tower, and then I would have to try to track both the tower and the background, and hope that I would get good results. But honestly, that is not the best solution for a shot that's got fractal noise going on in the background, because Mocha is a planar tracker, okay? So if it's super organic, it's not going to track very well. Things like reflections on water that are moving in one direction or smoke moving in one direction, Mocha can totally grab that and it'll rebuild it. But things like trees moving back and forth in a non-planar way, you're honestly better off patching it. So that's my advice there.
Yeah, I think that's a good answer. I mean, there can be times that you can use multiple clean plates and kind of get away with some of this kind of work. But, people do see the remove module and they kind of think it's magic. It's not magic. You know, there's actually a pretty clear methodology the way it's working. So there are times, you know, and as effects artists, I think many of us know that you do have to do some manual paint and clone and patchwork.
Yeah.
You know, we are not there yet at that point, but
Yeah.
I think the point is that this remove module will save you hours and hours of time.
Well, so, and of course, and one of the things I tell people all the time about the remove module, and I think this is really important to note, is that the remove module is going to get you 100% there on about 10 or 15% of your shots, okay, and it'll be perfect, you know. For about 60% of your shots, it's going to get you about 80% there, okay, and you're still going to have to do some hand tweaking to make it perfect for your art director, right? Because what you consider perfect and what some guy who's looking who's A-Bing your shots with a difference pass over them in color sweatbox is doing is going to be a completely different scenario. The other thing is there's literally going to be about like 20% of your shots that unfortunately are just going to be hand paint. They just are. Some shots are just brutal. So, but overall, the remove tool is going to double your workflow on your paint shots. It's going to pay for itself in 2 or 3 shots. I cannot recommend doing it enough. I still do freelance paint, and if I did not have the remove tool, I would pull my hair out. So,
Yeah, so let's just quickly, we're just going to wrap it up here, a couple business things, but let's just review, you know, Mocha Pro plugin version 5, it shipped, was that last week or 2 weeks ago? It's been a busy month, but the plugin supports Adobe Premiere, it supports Adobe After Effects, supports Avid Media Composer, which I'm certainly really excited about because I came from Avid 20 years ago, and adding this functionality for Media Composer is a huge thing. The Mocha version 5 is also available as a standalone, and just to reiterate that for the plugin for OFX hosts like Nuke and Resolve and Sony Vegas in beta, if you would like to beta test the OFX version of the plugin, please contact us. Might be a good time just to remind you guys that if you have not purchased Mocha Pro 5, that we do have a coupon code. And that coupon code, I don't know, Mary, if you have it in the slides, that would be great to bring up. It's WebJune16, and you basically just go to the Imagineer site, and that's good for any of the paths there, whether you're buying a full version of Mocha, you're buying just the plugin, which someone mentioned this on the webinar, and I think that's really important to note that the Mocha Pro plugin at a $695 price point is pretty much the most affordable that we've ever sold this product for. So we're really trying to do our best to get this product into the hands of all users.